Greetings and welcome to the Indonesia Energy Webcast. It is now my pleasure to introduce your host, Frank Griselli, President. Thank you. You may begin.
Good. Thank you for the intro. Good afternoon, everyone on the West Coast, where I am, and good evening to everybody on the East Coast, hopefully not interfering with your dinner. I'm Frank Griselli, as noted, President of Indonesia Energy Corp, and it's an honor and a privilege to be able to highlight today that notwithstanding the tragedy affecting all of us from COVID-19, coupled with the dramatic fall in oil prices, our company, Indonesia Energy, continues on track with its plans to drill 6 new producing wells this year that will increase production in our company by 400%. Some will ask, well, how can you do that when all these micro-cap and mid-cap energy companies in the U.S. are shutting in production and canceling all of their drilling? And unfortunately, many of them will probably go bankrupt in this crazy environment right now. Well, as you will see in this presentation, we are blessed at Indonesia Energy with one of the lowest cost production assets in the world. But more on that later. So let me just jump here to our cautionary slide. Oh, I got to do this. Let me do allow audience. Okay, here. Cautionary slide. Read that at your leisure, but it's important because when you make projections today, I don't think anybody 6 weeks ago would think that we'd be at $15 WTI price. So important to read that. But, let me talk a little about Indonesia, and I'm going to jump around. These slides are available. You go to our website, indonesiaenergy.com. You could look through all the slides in detail. I'm going to jump around a little because I want to tell you more of a general story and why we believe this is a compelling investment to make. So, Indonesia. Let me just see if this jumps here. Slide 11. Good. So Indonesia at a glance. I think a lot of people don't know Indonesia. They might know Indonesia because they've gone there for their honeymoon to Bali, and they know Bali. But I think some people don't even know that Bali is part of Indonesia. They probably think Bali is its own country. But Indonesia is the 4th largest country in the world. China, India, United States, Indonesia. It has the largest economy in Southeast Asia. It has a 100-year history in the energy industry, but really the last 50 years has been the core time in the energy industry. On the next slide, up there, we're not allowed. Let's just see if it pops up here. I don't know why it's not going to the next slide. Here we go. Good. On the next slide, it talks about the demand of growth in Indonesia. Well, for the last 11 years, Indonesia has been growing at a greater than 5% GDP growth. And because of that, the demand for energy is skyrocketing. Every year you've got 5, and this slide shows it, and you can go and look at the details there, but every year 5 to 6% increase in demand for energy, for oil, for natural gas, etc. So it's a growing country. It has investment grade securities. Interesting that the main language of all the energy contracts is in English. And because of that rich history in Indonesia and in the energy industry, we're going to jump to the next slide. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Next slide. This really tells you what's happened in the oil and gas industry in Indonesia. You can see here logos of every major company in the world. From my old company, Texaco, and I'll talk a little about that, and now Chevron, to Exxon, Shell, everybody that's there, BP, national oil companies from the Chinese to the Indonesian national oil company to ENI in Italy. Every company is operating throughout Indonesia. And why is that? It's because it really was one of the first international oil plays for the industry. And in when I left Texaco, and I'm going to come to this later on in my career, but when I left Texaco in 2001, November 2001, Indonesia was the #1 producing asset for Texaco in the world. Chevron, which took over Texaco in 2001, it was the #2 producing asset for Chevron in the world. Together, we were actually partners. Together, we produced 1 million barrels of oil a day, 1 million barrels of oil a day. Over the course of our involvement in Indonesia, Chevron Texaco, you go to the Chevron website, you'll see that they've produced 12 billion barrels of oil on Indonesia and have produced $1 trillion of cash flow. Just enormous asset for the company. That asset has declined. They've been there for 50 years. They've sucked out some of the oil. I think it's probably producing now 200,000 barrels a day for Chevron. But Indonesia has been a play and has been one of the leaders in the international energy industry for developing contracts, fiscal terms, etc. So it's a great place to do business. Its most important core industry has been the oil and gas industry. It's a member of OPEC. Unfortunately, as all these fields, though, have declined, Indonesia is an importer of oil and gas. So they don't export anymore. And that's why that gave the great opportunity to our company, Indonesia Energy, to start as a private company and now move up to the New York Stock Exchange. I'm trying to get to this next slide here. Let's see if it works. Let's push into slide number 8 here. Good. So management team. So here we are. We started as a private company about 4 years ago. And 2 of the individuals on this page on the executive team, the top left and the top right, they poured into this company $30 million of their own cash to start the company, develop some of the 2 assets I'll talk about at the company, and build a management and operating team around them. Myself, below me, the CFO who worked with me, my prior startup, and operating and technical people that have experience in Indonesia, in Asia, in the international energy industry. So on December 19th, we became a public New York Stock Exchange company. And what was interesting is that was the first IPO of any company ever to do an IPO on the New York Stock Exchange, or for that matter, the NASDAQ, out of Indonesia. 4th largest country in the world, largest economy in Southeast Asia, 16th largest economy in the world, first company to ever do an IPO. So that was very important to the country, very important for a boost to the industry there. Even though we're such a tiny microcap company, it was a very, let's see if this will work here to go to this other slide I wanted to show here. So we had the great fortune on February 14th to ring the opening bell on the New York Stock Exchange. And what tells you the story about the importance of this being the first IPO for Indonesia is joining us on that podium was the Secretary General of the country, the 2 ambassadors to the United States, one to the United Nations, one to Washington, and the Minister of Energy from Indonesia. For our small 30+ million market cap company, they all appeared there because it was historic for the country. And as I'll show later, we have one asset, not the one that's producing the cash and will drill those 6 wells, but our other asset that's an elephant-sized field asset, one that will attract all the major international oil companies as we go further into the development of that asset. So let me tell a little about myself. Why did I join this Indonesia Energy Corp? I've been 41 years in this industry. I joined Texaco in 1979. I spent 23 years at Texaco. And during that time of my career, I was really the deal maker there. While I have an MBA and a law degree, I never practiced law. I was a deal maker for Texaco. I put together some of their most important and valuable assets for Texaco. I got rewarded. At the age of 44, I was named president of Texaco International and had just an incredible, wonderful career there. When Chevron took over in 2001, I retired. I was a senior executive, so I got all my stock, my options, everything else. And I went out and I used that experience and what I learned at Texaco, and I started up 2 oil and gas companies. The first one we successfully sold in around 2009, 2010 in the energy crisis for a 10x return to our original investors. We moved that company privately up to the New York Stock Exchange. 6 months later, I started a company called PEDEVCO, PED symbol, on the New York Stock Exchange. It's there today. And that company was developing shale interests, and now it's developing in the Permian Basin. We were able to find a significant and a very important investor that helped us get out of our crunch with the debt that we had. And he came in, took out all the debt, invested huge amounts of money. I left there a year and a half ago, and then get a telephone call from an investment bank saying, hey, we're representing this company, Indonesia Energy. They want to go public on the New York Stock Exchange, and we think that your resume or experience will be very helpful to them. Well, I ran over there. I met with the principals. I visited the oil fields. I kicked the tires, and I said, you know what? At this stage in my career, 65 years old, this is where I want to end my career. This is where I want to do what I did at Texaco, best at Texaco. And when I left the biggest producing asset in the world for Texaco, I want to see what I can do here at Indonesia Energy to work with them, work with my colleagues there to drive value and shareholder value for the company. A little bit about I just want to say those 2 original, the private investors that started this company, very strong. You know, the reason you had the Minister of Energy also there and the Secretary General of the country is because of the relationships that they have in the country. One of them is the monopoly producer of all food for the military, the police, for much of the United Nations in Southeast Asia, and they're also the largest rice producer in Indonesia. And with 270 million people there, there's a lot of rice being consumed in Indonesia. So very good relationships with the government that sort of helped to get our assets that we have today. So I want to go to slide 13 here, and let's see if that comes up. To talk, whoops, not, wait, what did I do here? Sorry, I want to go to slide 15, 16, right here. Slide 15, here we go. Good. Okay, this is an overview of our assets. So Indonesia, as you might know, is a lot of islands that all come together to populate 270 million people. But the most important islands, certainly for the oil and gas industry, is the one where you see that green block. That's the island of Sumatra. The island below that to the right where the red block is, that's the island of Java. But let's talk about Sumatra and the asset we have in Sumatra. If you go to, let's see if this will work here. Next slide, close. Here we go. Here, so this is our block there on what's called the KRUH block, KRUH. Currently, this block, we have 4 wells producing, now at about 250 barrels a day. But it has the ability for us to drill continuous, more drilling, producing wells, probably 80 to 100 of them over time. But this is where we announced that we're going to drill the 6 new wells this year, starting in July. So just in 60 days, in July, we'll start drilling those wells. This is also the island of Sumatra where Chevron Texaco produced a good portion of those 12 billion barrels that they produced. So this is the oil, the heart of the oil production center in Indonesia. We go to the next slide. This really tells a story of why we're going to continue to drill 6 new wells in Indonesia in this asset, the KRUH block. Single well economics. This sort of tells the whole story. In the top right block, it tells you what our average production cost is historically right now, up to date. And that's a little over $21 a barrel. That is basically our break-even point for oil production in Indonesia right now. With the new 6 wells we're drilling, we believe we're going to drive that number down even lower. Unfortunately for our colleagues here in the United States that are drilling in shale and in the Permian and elsewhere, they probably need $40 to $50 a barrel to break even. That's why I said in the beginning, we're blessed. We're blessed with an asset that even at today's price, we can make a margin. We can make a profit, net cash flow. We have a very low decline rate. That's what that bottom chart to the right shows you, about 20% the first year. By the way, shale declines at about 80%. An important number on the top left is what's going to be our production rate per well. Well, initial production we expect to be, it's on the top left and the bottom left. We expect 191 barrels of oil per day as the initial production, averaging the first 12 months about 173 barrels of oil per day. So you just take the multiplication. We're at 250 barrels right now. By the end of this year, by December 31st, we should be at about 1,250 barrels a day. Just what I mentioned in the beginning, a 400% increase in production. Well, how long are these wells going to take? And how much do they cost? As we note here, the cost of one well is $1.5 million. Cheap compared to shale wells at $5 million or Permian wells at $5 million here in the United States. $1.5 million all in to drill a producing well. What is going to be the net cash flow? Well, that chart to the left gives you what the net cash flow will be. First year net cash flow will be about $2.1 million. Now that was done when oil, this was based on about $55 to $60 barrel oil. We're now half that. So, even if we're getting 1 million net cash flow per well, you can see we've got economically viable wells to be drilled here. So you can take all your multiplication on there, see where we're going to be, but we certainly will be covering as a cash flow positive company with income, and that's why we stand out in the industry with such a low cost opportunity. This is a cash cow. We're going to keep drilling. Where will oil prices be? I think most people forecast will probably get up, and when this whole craziness ends, get up towards the end of the year in the upper 20s, and that'll give us a very significant margin on this asset. And every dollar will hit the bottom line in terms of profitability. So let's just go to what our other asset is. So I'm going to click on this slide. Let's see. Going to slide 18. Here we go. So this is our other asset. It's called the CITARUM block. This block is on the island of Java. Java is the largest island in terms of population in Indonesia. About half the population is on the island of Java. When you look at that picture over to the right, you can see the offshores, the blue. There's our block, 1 million acres. And you can see to the left, there's Jakarta City. Jakarta is the largest city in Indonesia, the capital. Jakarta and its environs has about 30 million people. So here we are, only 16 miles from the city of Jakarta. That's the edge of our block. 1 million acres. A perspective, 1 million acres is 70 times the size of Manhattan. 70 times the size of Manhattan, sitting 16 miles from the capital city. An enormous opportunity for us. The next slide shows you that a Canadian company which had this block before us, they lost the block because they basically went bankrupt, couldn't continue on in that. We wanted it in a competitive bid. They drilled 4 discovery wells. They invested $40 million in this well, 4 major discovery natural gas wells. That's what we're going to produce here, is natural gas. The other block, as we mentioned, was oil. This is natural gas. What are we going to get paid here? We're going to get paid $7 an MMBTU, $7 for a normal unit of natural gas. What do you get in the United States? About $1.90 today. So here we are, over 300% higher natural gas price. By the way, on our oil production block, we're getting paid Brent, which is a significant major premium in the 20s now, above WTI, which again, the US people are getting. What's in place on this block? I'm going to click on this one last slide here. So again, you'll see our block here, and you'll see all those lines going through it. Those are natural gas pipelines and some proposed pipelines. I note that Indonesia just signed a contract with the United Arab Emirates to build $23 billion worth of more infrastructure for natural gas. This is an enormous well for the company, an enormous asset for the company, enormous block. And, you know, we're going to develop this. This is what turns the heads of the major companies. This turns the heads of the Chevrons, the Exxons, everybody else. So our intent here is drill 2 wells starting late this year, early 2021. We're going to drill those wells. We expect those 2 wells to be parallel to the discoveries already made. When we drill those, then we will invite in partners like Chevron and Exxon to join in here and pay a huge premium to get in. So this is like the huge mega elephant field for the company. The other one is the cash cow. So I see that we're just right at the end here. So I just wanted to end to tell you that, you know, I've had a wonderful 41-year career in my life, but I've had enormous fun this last 1.5 years at Indonesia Energy Company. It's where I had my biggest asset in Texaco when I left, and now I want to do what I can to help them. So I can assure you that our whole team is diligently and ethically and efficiently and most importantly, safely working to deliver shareholder value. I'm proud to be the president of this company, and we take your investment in our company very seriously and always keep in mind the goal to deliver shareholder value. So I will end it there. I think I took my 22 minutes. I would love to answer some questions, but I think I'm a little tight on that. But I mean, I'll see you. Just going to look at them really quick and just answer one question here. Here's one. Is your company looking at any acquisitions at the time? Of course you always are, but you know what? I've learned important to stay laser focused on our assets, develop those 6 wells, start that production, increase our production 400%, and deliver on that for the shareholders. We can always look at acquisitions, but stay focused and laser focused. Political environment in Indonesia, it's great. That's why the oil industry has been there for 50 years and is still there. They're not having as much of a problem. Look at today's New York Times. They're one of the smallest cases in COVID-19 right now. They're suffering like everyone else is, but they're in good shape. So I want to end it there. I want to thank everybody for listening. And as you can tell, I'm excited to be here at Indonesia Energy, and we value your interest and your investment, and look forward to telling the story as time goes on. Thank you.
This concludes today's webcast. You may disconnect your line at this time and have a great day.